A major fire, a total airport shutdown, flights are grounded, travelers are stranded, and the financial losses are already rising into the millions. Was this just an accident or something far more sinister? Heathrow, Europe's busiest airport, is paralyzed after a fire at an electrical substation plunged operations into chaos. This is the blaze that shut down the airport. But the real question is, was this just an accident? Counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation, raising urgent questions about whether this was sabotage. The fire erupted shortly before midnight, triggering a massive power outage and bringing the global travel hub to a standstill. The Metropolitan Police insist there is no evidence of foul play yet. However, given Heathrow's status as critical infrastructure, the force's Counter-Terrorism Command, or SO15, has now taken charge, vowing to leave no stone unturned. The Prime Minister's spokesperson said that there are questions to answer over how a single fire knocked out Heathrow. Number 10 says they expect those questions to be answered, but the priority is bringing the fire under control. Now, this is the moment of the explosion. Large fire and clouds of black smoke rising over skyline from electrical substation. Listening to what the eyewitnesses describe of absolute chaos at the Heathrow airport had to say.
The sky sort of just blackened, and then I just saw absolute chaos, really. To the right of me, I saw this large plumes of smoke and a huge fire. And as I'm driving, I had my sunroof open, just getting some fresh air. I felt the heat from the fire. That's how close I was. It was definitely scary. I feel it's sort of almost like apocalyptic sort of level of just chaos. When infrastructure is down and there's no controls whatsoever all the way. So my journey all the way home was just with no power.
According to the airport authorities, the backup generators did spring into action, but they were not enough to power the whole airport. The power is back at the airport right now, but the passengers are worried as the travel plans have gone haywire. Hotels and pubs near the airport are packed with stranded passengers.
I'm about to go back to the UK, but I think there's an incident that happened in the UK, a fire incident which affected the electricity at the Heathrow airport. So for now, we're just waiting to get information on if we're going to be able to fly back to UK or not. So we're just waiting for the airline to keep us updated.
So we're travelling to Barcelona today. Our initial flight was meant to leave at 10:40 and our connection was at 1:15 today. So we took a seat on a flight to Gatwick to try and enable us to connect to Barcelona through this airport, which we can't do. So our flight that was meant to be scheduled at 1 is now at 5 a.m. So we're now trying to obtain a hotel, hopefully near Heathrow, so that we can try and make our connection in the morning instead.
With more than 1,351 flights disrupted and at least 290,000 passengers affected, the fallout is catastrophic. Planes have been rerouted to Ireland and France, and aviation experts compare the scale of disruption to post-9/11 airspace shutdowns.
You imagine, 145,000 passengers affected. All the insurance claims on those, the aircraft being in the wrong place, the crews being up to time, fuel costs. I mean, who knows? Certainly, 50 million UK is what we're looking at as a bare minimum.
The national grid has now restored power, but the chaos is far from over. The financial toll will be staggering, with ripple effects expected to disrupt global aviation for days. Heathrow's vulnerability is now under scrutiny. Was this a freak accident or something else? Well, we all will have to wait for answers. All right, a major controversy has hit Tollywood as the Telangana police has filed an FIR implicating 25 Tollywood stars and influencers for allegedly promoting illegal betting, casino and gambling platforms. Among the high-profile names are actors Rana Daggupati, Prakash Raj and Vijay Deverakonda. The FIR claims these platforms use star endorsements to attract users through online ads, adding that these apps enticed individuals, particularly from middle class and lower middle class backgrounds, into gambling. The FIR further highlights that many families have suffered severe financial hardships due to addiction to these platforms. Actor Prakash Raj responded to the allegation, stating that his involvement was limited to an ad campaign in 2016, which he ended within a year's time. The actor added that he is currently gathering more information about the case. And in a post from his official account on Instagram, Prakash Raj said that he is yet to be contacted by Telangana police on that matter.
Well, just now from here I came to know on the social media and certain media talking about the betting app ad I did. And I asked questions to everybody and I need to answer too. So this is my answer. I have not received anything from the police station or any summons as such, and when it does, I will definitely reply them. But I think it's my responsibility to reply and clear things for you.
Meanwhile, Rana Daggupati's team clarified that his association with a gaming platform was strictly legal. According to a spokesperson, his endorsement of skill-based games ended in 2017 and was confined to regions where such activities were legally permitted, emphasizing that Rana's legal team carefully vets all contracts to ensure compliance with the law. The spokesperson also highlighted that the Supreme Court has distinguished skill-based games from gambling, recognizing them as legal, adding that Rana's endorsements were in line with these regulations. Meanwhile, actor Vijay Deverakonda said that he only promoted legal skill-based gaming platforms. Incidentally, this also comes just a few months after actor Allu Arjun was arrested in December after a woman died in the chaos that ensued at the launch of his movie Pushpa 2 in Hyderabad. Arjun's arrest had led to widespread criticism from the movie industry. Now, as the investigation unfolds in the betting scandal, the spotlight continues to remain on the stars that were involved in this. Israel is in crisis. Its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces growing opposition, not just from demonstrators on the streets, but also from the Israeli president, as well as Supreme Court. Amid massive demonstrations against Netanyahu's decision to fire Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar, Israel's Supreme Court issued an injunction on Friday, temporarily freezing Bar's dismissal. Before this, as his cabinet has moved to fire Israel's domestic security chief, Israeli President Isaac Herzog warned of an alarming political breakdown. It's already clear that Israel is deeply divided internally amid the war in Gaza. Is it now on the brink of an internal collapse? Here's why we ask this. President Herzog's rare rebuke is a sign of deep fractures within the government. On Thursday, Herzog expressed concern over steps taken by Netanyahu's government, just a few hours before the cabinet fired the head of Shin Bet. In a video statement, he said, and I quote, "It is impossible not to be deeply troubled by the harsh reality unfolding before our eyes. It is unthinkable to resume fighting while still pursuing the sacred mission of bringing our hostages home. Thousands of reserve duty call-ups have recently been issued, and it is inconceivable to send our sons to the front line simultaneously, while advancing divisive and controversial initiatives that create deep rifts within our nation," unquote. Without naming him, the Israeli president not only criticized Netanyahu's decision to resume war in Gaza, this while Israeli hostages, including some who are known to be alive, remain in Gaza. He asked decision makers to assess whether the decision to go back to war in Gaza really strengthens so-called national resilience. Remember, earlier this week, Netanyahu announced a return to the war in Gaza, sending in ground troops. This was after talks on extending the truce with the Palestinian militant group Hamas, which had allegedly reached a dead end. But the Israeli president is not the only one questioning Netanyahu's motives. The Israeli public is angry and continued to take their anger to the streets, even if it meant clashing with the Israeli security personnel. On Friday, Israeli demonstrators tried to breach police barriers leading to the Israeli Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem. They demanded his resignation. They scuffled with police, who blocked their access to the street. Footage showed demonstrators chanting, "Time to overthrow the dictator," as anger simmers over Netanyahu's government. In fact, one demonstrator said they were concerned about the last days of Israel as a democracy.
I am looking at the end of the way of Israel as we knew it in the past. We are very concerned that these are the last days of Israel as a democracy. We are here to try and change this course, but the chances are not very high.
And a day earlier on Thursday, thousands of Israelis braved the rain as well as plunging temperatures in Jerusalem to raise their voice against Netanyahu's decision to return to war, which they see as forsaking the hostages. The demonstrators also voiced opposition to Netanyahu's bid to oust Ronen Bar, head of the Shin Bet Internal Security Agency. But after 3 days of demonstrating against the move, the Israeli cabinet today voted early to dismiss the head of the Shin Bet, effective April 10th. Israelis demonstrating Bar's sacking have joined forces with demonstrators angry at the decision to resume fighting in Gaza. In Gaza, Israeli attacks have killed nearly 600. Israel's military says a ground invasion of southern Gaza's Rafah is underway, and troops are pushing into the north near the town of Beit Lahaya and other central areas. And according to UNICEF, at least 200 children have been killed. That's since Israel resumed its war on the besieged Palestinian enclave this week. But even before the latest escalation, Israelis have held regular demonstrations against Netanyahu's government. At this point, it has become increasingly clear that Netanyahu's thirst for blood is not only deepening the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, but it is also exacerbating tensions across the region and pushing West Asia towards instability. Look at the spillover effects in Syria, Lebanon and Yemen. One rather can't help but wonder, does Netanyahu have a long-term strategy for Gaza, or is he just waging a campaign of destruction with no exit strategy? Our next story is about Sudan. It is in crisis, and the world is not even talking about it. Today, the Sudanese military has retaken the presidential palace, which is the seat of the government in capital Khartoum. This is a major victory for them. After almost 2 years of a brutal civil war, which the United Nations has described as the world's largest and most devastating humanitarian crisis, Friday's victory is perhaps the army's most symbolic, since they launched a key counter-offensive against the paramilitary rapid support forces in September last year. However, the war is far from over. The RSF still controls large parts of Khartoum as well as other regions, posing a formidable challenge to the Sudanese army. This is a brutal conflict with mass displacement, famine and genocide. The crisis in Sudan is spiraling out of control. More than 11 million people have been forced from their homes. Children as young as 1 are being subjected to horrific violence, and entire communities are being wiped out. Yet, as the world focuses on Ukraine and Gaza, Sudan's suffering is largely ignored. Here's what you should be knowing about one of the deadliest crises taking place in Africa on Friday. The Sudanese army soldiers were seen hoisting their weapons and celebrating outside the country's presidential palace in Khartoum. Video released by the Sudanese army showed the army personnel inside the presidential palace. And Friday's developments were one of the most significant advances in the two-year-old conflict that has threatened to fracture the country. The building was the last heavily guarded RSF bastion in the city. A spokesperson for the Sudanese military said, Brigadier General Nabil Abdullah said in a video statement posted on social media that the army has crushed fighters from the Rapid Support Forces and retaken the Republican Palace, which he described as a symbol of sovereignty and dignity of the Sudanese nation. But will this war end? The short answer to that question is unlikely. The military victory in Khartoum will likely just move the war in Sudan into a new chapter. You see, the RSF in a statement on its social media account said that the battle for the palace has not ended yet, as its forces were still in the vicinity of the area. The rebel group said its forces have attacked members of the military inside the palace. The RSF also still controls major areas in other parts of the country, including the western Darfur region, which means that fighting has just created a de facto partition of Sudan into military and RSF-run zones. The war erupted in April 2023 between the military and the RSF. Battles raged in Khartoum and around the country. The leaders of the two forces, who had been allies, were meant to have overseen the democratic transition after a popular uprising in 2019. But what happened instead was a bloody fight for power between the RSF and military. Since then, at least 28,000 people have been killed, though the number is likely far higher. The war has driven more than 14 million people from their homes and pushed parts of the country into famine. The war has made Sudan the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. The numbers are staggering. The World Health Organization says at least 20,000 people have so far been killed in the war in Sudan. Other estimates put the toll to 150,000. According to UN figures, at least 10 million people in Sudan have been forced from their homes, making it the world's largest displacement crisis. In August last year, a UN-backed assessment declared a famine in the Zamzam refugee camp located in the western Darfur region, largely controlled by RSF paramilitary. According to a recent report by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, RSF fighters had detained at least 10,000 people in Khartoum since the start of the war until June last year. With the military and the RSF, they are accused of abuses. But RSF has been accused of various other atrocities. In January, the outgoing Biden administration imposed sanctions on Burhan, Sudan's army chief, and the RSF head, Hemedti. The RSF grew out of the notorious Janjaweed militias mobilized 2 decades ago by then-President Omar al-Bashir against populations that rather identify as Central or East African in Darfur. The Janjaweed were accused of mass killings, rapes and other atrocities. The RSF now operates as a well-equipped and rather highly strong force, relying on guerrilla warfare tactics. Unlike the Sudanese military, which controls the country's air force and heavy artillery, the RSF specializes in urban combat, ambushes and hit-and-run attacks. Now, the army in Sudan captures of the presidential palace raises fears that Sudan is increasingly approaching a de facto partition. The RSF is already backing a parallel government and remains in control of 4 of the 5 regions in the sprawling region of Darfur. Experts on Sudan say that Sudan appears to be heading to a Libya scenario, referencing the split in governance between the two competing authorities who are aligned with the web of armed groups and militias. What about peace, if you wonder? The army has long refused to engage in peace talks with the RSF and has repeatedly said it plans to recapture the entire country. How long that takes, That's anybody's guess. For now, one of the biggest worry with Sudan is whether it faces a second partition.